Good. Okay. So as a, I'm going to, I know we have a very sort of diverse audience here, though all from the IIM network, but very diverse in terms of number of years of experience and so on. So I'm going to address this next session, addressing all of you as consumers, because one thing is common between all of us, we are all consumers, right, of something or the other. So as consumers, we are consuming a whole lot of analytics today. We don't recognize how much analytics we are actually consuming. Next time you are going for a vacation to maybe, let's say, Russia, maybe you're not go to Russia, but let's say some other country where they don't speak English, try a translate app on your phone which in real time can read the signs. You can just point the phone at the sign, and it'll actually translate it and give you what the sign means on the same picture. That's what a translate app already does that for you. Imagine how difficult it is to actually read, scan the text, and then understand, translate that in real time and relay it back on the same picture so that you can get a seamless experience of translation. Imagine you searching on Google and saying, let's say, make two different kinds of searches, right? If you say cheap flowers, and let's say you say red roses, you get a totally different experience in terms of the ads that show up. Presumably similar searches, but Google understands that when you say cheap flowers, you're most likely going to buy. So there's a whole lot of more ads trying to target you. Whereas if you say red roses, it actually shows you lots of pictures of flowers, because maybe you're not in the buying mode here. So it actually understands your intent when you're searching. Your spam has actually decreased over the years. Even though spam systems have become very, very sophisticated, the spam algorithms are actually one step ahead of the spam perpetrators. Okay, maybe. Okay, so a bunch of things are going on, and we are actually consuming this analytics. It's just that we don't recognize that all of this is playing. Your Facebook and LinkedIn messages looking at feeds looking very, very relevant, clickable. It's all because of the millions of possibilities that exist. These algorithms are working in real time and figuring out what is most relevant to you, right? But this is not a consistent phenomenon. We've also seen, as consumers, a whole lot of companies that just don't understand us, and you have these really frustrating experiences talking to call centers, your frustrating experiences saying, hey, you should know this, I already told you this, or you have this data already with you, why are you asking me this again, and stuff like that. But because this is not very consistent. In fact, one of the ways I like to look at the world is through this two-dimensional lens. On the x-axis, how sophisticated is the analytics that companies are using, and the y-axis, how institutionalized it is in usage, meaning how data-driven is the company in the way they work. So there are companies, the usual suspects are right at the top here, right? I mean, you expect them, like Amazon, Google, Netflix, and so on. But in general, the biggest companies in the world, the Fortune 100 companies, they are all over this map. They're all moving from the bottom left-hand corner to the top right-hand corner. That's what's going on. And I'm sure you're experiencing in the companies that you work for as well, that there's so much more we can do in terms of both sophistication as well as institutionalization. And how are companies using analytics now? And here's a way to look at that. Here are the 5 dimensions in which I believe companies are transforming their business through analytics. We talked about the sophistication and institutionalization dimension, but there are here the dimensions, and I'm going to walk you through each of these dimensions in a little bit more detail. Okay, let's start with one interesting story here. This is called bingiton.com. There is a website called Bingiton. You can't access it from India, but from several countries like US and UK, you can access this website. What it does is it actually runs a blind comparison between Google and Bing results for any search that you do. So you can actually search 5 times, and it'll tell you, and you'll have to select. So one panel will show you results from Google, one panel will show you results from Bing, and then you have to pick what is a better result. And after 5 attempts, it'll tell you which Google one or Bing one. This is a contest that Bing runs just so that it can demonstrate to you that Bing is as good as Google in terms of search results, right? And let's say I ran a question like who founded P&G. Okay, this is my question, and you can see the results. You can make out which is better, but the point here is that the results look very, very comparable. They're almost as good as each other. Okay, and if you do 5 times, it's 3-2, 2-3 Google versus Bing. So why does Google have such an extraordinary large market share, and how does that work for them? So I asked a friend of mine who's a researcher, who used to be a researcher at Microsoft, has 250 patents, and one of those patents he also has shares with Bill Gates. He told me the secret. He said that as far as the 99% of queries are concerned, these are commonly done queries. These are, in this, Google and Bing are equally good. They have equal amount of data to tune the results. So every time you click on a link, they understand that, okay, this link worked for you or didn't work for you. So based on that, they can refine their algorithms. So 99% of the time, they're equally good. It's those 1% of the time that Google has so much more data than Bing. It has, because of having had a larger market share over the years and having used that data very effectively over 16 years, they have a very, very fine-tuned algorithm, especially for the low-frequency queries. Bing, unfortunately, because of their low market share, doesn't have access to that much of data for very infrequently asked questions. And therefore, that is one place where Google beats Bing very, very easily. Yes, it doesn't show up in a contest like this, but the differentiation between Google and Bing is really not on the algorithm anymore. They have equally good algorithms. They've got equally good analytics. The big difference between the two is the quality of the data or the amount of data that they have. And that's really one of the most important things that companies don't recognize today is data is going to become their differentiator, right? This is playing out, whether if you look at Google versus Apple, the contest that happened when Apple launched its Maps algorithm, Maps app back a few years ago and had to take it back and allow people to use Google Maps again. That's because Google had 7,500 people traveling across the world collecting data for the Maps app, whereas Apple was trying to do it through technology but didn't have the quality of the data. So again, Google won over Apple in that sense. So the differentiation and the fight is actually moved to who's going to have better quality of data, and can you bring in a new source of data? Because from the same source of data, you can build better algorithms, but it can only go that far. But if you can bring a new source of data, things change. So, what are the new sources of data that are coming through? If you look at Internet of Things, it's bringing you a whole set of new data, right? Companies are also saying, let's store everything. Let's not delete data, because I will use this data for something. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, maybe a year ago, we worked with, we were not working with, we're just advising an Indian startup company who wanted to understand their impact of marketing and attribute what is working in their marketing. So we asked them, do you have clickstream data for the last few years or last year or two? They said, no, we just keep it for 15 days and then we delete it because the data size is just too large. It just builds up too fast. If you do that, then, if you want to answer the question, you have to start building the data again. So companies are recognizing that now and storing everything. They're fusing internal and external data, and also leveraging structured and unstructured data. And let me give you an example of something like that. Quick example of when we use unstructured data, there's a lot of value in unstructured data that people are not recognizing. But if you bring in that unstructured data and add to your structured data is what is coming out of transactions and stuff like that. Unstructured data is things like call center notes and emails and stuff like that, which are not in any database, right? Here's an example of what we have done in one place. If it's accurate using structured data, it's got a model classification accuracy of 68%. And some different statistics like KS, etc. And I don't want to bore you with the stats, but essentially what I'm trying to establish to you is that unstructured data on its own gives you this, but when you add both of them, you get a much more powerful model than compared to just unstructured data or structured data. So adding a unstructured sort of set of data to your models actually dramatically improves your accuracy in what you're predicting. Okay, so that's as far as data is concerned. Second point here is around real time. This is something I actually did a couple of weeks ago. I know I'm sure you're probably aware of the church shooting that happened in South Carolina last week, which has caused a nationwide uproar, and now they're bringing down the Confederate flags everywhere. But one of the things that's happened after that, post that incident, this is a few hours after that incident, Google, if you actually go to your search box in your Chrome, it started showing, when you said South Carolina, the first suggested search item was this. Just imagine, this was not a phenomenon even a few hours before that. But in a few hours, the algorithm sort of learned and tweaked and made sure that it is actually suggesting to your search term that you're probably likely to search, right? This is how real-time analytics has got, right? This, I'm sure, some of you, they're partners, so I don't want to say too many negative things about Uber here, but, they have this surge pricing going on, which you may hate as a consumer, but they have figured out exactly how to monetize the demand-supply gaps and give you price at a real-time basis. That's one of the major contributions to us. And imagine that at 12 o'clock, let's say you wanted to step out of this place and go out for lunch, right? And you search restaurant on your app, some app or search or somewhere. What is it going to give you? Is it going to give you an option of, let's say, a Starbucks lunch box, or a Subway option, or maybe a Chinese restaurant? What should it give you? Should it understand you as a customer? Should it understand your context? Should it understand that it's raining outside, therefore you're probably not going to walk too much? Should it give you an answer based on your current real-time context, or should it just give you a random set of results that work for you? So that's really what's changing. Analytics is becoming much more real-time, not just actioning in real time, but also learning in real time. Okay, and given that we make decisions as consumers, we imagine the last time you bought some new product, let's say a cell phone. How did you buy it? Where did you do your research? And how did you eventually buy it? You may have bought the product offline, or you may have bought it online. But you may have talked to a few friends. You may have, chatted with somebody on Facebook on whether this phone model is really good. Eventually, you may have seen some ads, some billboards, or some online display ads. But eventually, you went and bought it offline or online. So your decision journey in terms of buying a product from the time some influencers started appearing on your radar is very, very complex now. All of these are acting, but net you go and buy a product offline or online. To understand what is working and what is not working, traditionally people have done a very high level sort of approach, which is, okay, this much amount I'm investing in marketing, this much amount I'm getting in sales. Let's build a model to connect marketing to sales, okay? So that's then, and it's called a marketing mix model, right? Over the years, that's what people have been doing. But if that doesn't still, that basically means they have no understanding of what is really going on, what are the underlying phenomenon that are actually in play. You just know that A is correlated to B. If I do more of A, I get more of B. Okay, that was the thinking. But now it's getting much more sophisticated, and it's becoming much more granular. So as marketing has become more hyper-personalized, like I was telling you about this, what to display as a search when you search, it's also becoming, the analysis is becoming much more granular, much more scientific. So ground up, understand all the influences, and then scientifically attribute which of these influences created how much impact, and therefore you bought the product. That's called the world of digital attribution. For example, there are channels that introduce you to a product, and there are channels that influence you to buy, and finally there are channels that help you close the sale. If you don't understand all of these and don't appropriately attribute, you will actually end up giving more weightage to channels that are closest to the sale. And that's what, the affiliates and stuff like that, the last click. So that was the earlier era. People were doing last click attributing to sales. Now it's much more sophisticated in terms of understanding all the various influences that have worked and therefore getting much better read on where to invest your marketing dollars going forward. So that's how sophisticated analytics is getting. Okay, so this is an example of where we would have used sophistication. Yes, you will use a bunch of models. You will use AI and if you think of some of the, think of Google today, for example, it is a search engine, but really it's a giant AI machine trying to learn with every single transaction and learning who you are and what you want, right? So the future of analytics is also in AI. The kind of artificial intelligence techniques which we used to hear of back in the 90s and we were disillusioned with are now all back in big supply. And all the major companies, major e-commerce and internet companies in the world are trying to move from sophisticated analytics to much more AI-based analytics, which is even more sophisticated. Okay. So once you do that, how do you keep learning, right? I mean, you have the next phase is really to institutionalize. You've done a bunch of experiments, and some are working and some are not working. And now, how do we scale this up and to continuously learn? That's another very critical aspect of how analytics is being used. So take an example of how do we understand consumers? We talked about when you search for, at 12 o'clock, you search for a restaurant, what do you get? You get the right answers basically based on customer understanding. This customer likes Chinese cuisine, or this customer likes, let's say, Indian cuisine. So those are kinds of things that you understand through customers. You also understand better about your products, right? Because every transaction that's taking place, it also gives you more intelligence on when your product is selling, how does it sell for, what is the price elasticities, and so on. And you also get to know more about what offers are working, what are not working. You put them all in a box here and optimize and say this is every consumer gets this specific offer or something based on who this consumer really is, what is her context, and what is she likely to do, and then therefore give her the offer, right? While you're doing that, you also set up some experimentation because you want to learn, and you just don't want to apply analytics and make and sort of and get results from it, but also see what is working and what is not working, and therefore what is the impact over if I did it randomly, right? So you need to continuously learn and experiment. So you have to have a systematic experimentation. Here, the example is of Amazon. And if you've gone to the Amazon shopping cart of yours on Amazon.in or Amazon.com, you'll see that every time you visit your cart, prices tend to change, and in a very, very seemingly random manner. But what really Amazon is doing is systematically experimenting on what works, what pricing works, and what is the elasticity of demand based on the different prices. They still have made one promise that they will not do differential pricing for customers, so every customer gets the same price, but they can change the price anytime, right? So they're looking to understand how do consumers react when price changes at a systematic scale, at a really large scale, because think of millions of SKUs, a few million SKUs across hundreds of millions of customers, right? Systematic experimentation. So once you do that, and you get results, right, which is something. You might be looking, if you are SAP, you're not looking for somebody to buy your product online, but your result is somebody downloading a PDF from your website. But if you're Amazon, you're probably thinking of a product sale. But some results you're looking for, clicks, transactions of some. And once you get those results, you understand what are the influences. There are some influences that I directly had through this offer that I sent, but there are some other influences like social media, there are advertising and so on that I am doing in parallel. And there are non-controllable influences like competition and weather. And extract all these influences, learn from it, and then build and keep learning. So this is one example of how I can continue to operationalize and keep learning from every new thing that I'm doing with my consumers. But in general, the theme is of institutionalization, that I need to do this at scale in a data-driven manner consistently across my business, right? This is the example is of marketing here, but it is for every decision. We have, for example, I don't know if you're aware, there's a P&G, which is one of our clients, has this thing called Business Sphere, where every, I think about 50 different places around the world, they have these big decision cockpits where they sit inside a room and they have surrounded by these huge screens, and any problem that they want to solve, they can actually get down to the questions and the answers in real time and then make the decision. So it could be like, okay, I'm not doing very well in UK. That's because I have to decrease my prices drill down and then say, okay, maybe it's Tesco where I'm not doing, and maybe Tesco, the product is Tide, and maybe Tide is not doing well because the distribution is really is messed up. So I can get to that kind of answer and make decisions in real time using analytics. But they have basically made it data-driven and institutionalized it across the organization. Okay, so these are the 4 dimensions so far. The last and important critical dimension is that of disruption. This kind of experimentation, just imagine how many companies are winning the kind of TV awards being won by internet companies. Like Netflix won a bunch of Emmys for House of Cards. I'm sure some of you have seen it. And recently, Transparent, which is the Amazon original series, also won a bunch of awards for this show. So why are these internet companies winning TV awards? That's because they have decided to experiment, and they are obviously using a lot of analytics to build some of this. The House of Cards, the whole concept of the show was done based on a lot of data that Netflix had collected. But they're also willing to experiment, spend money, and disrupt the existing player. One of the major ways they're disrupting is through creating their own content. And I think eventually analytics is being used by companies to not just basically make their business more efficient and effective, but also to disrupt their own business or other businesses. And that's how the experimentation point actually really works. So these are the 5 dimensions of analytics. In a nutshell, these are the various things that companies are doing to get better and make analytics much more integral to their business. Thank you.
Thank you, Srikanth.